Desertification Island Discs Volume 2. We made it to issue 2, which is a massive surprise. But I'm delighted today to be joined by an old friend, not literally, but he's a great guy, Robert Spencer from AECOM. Hi, Robert. How are you today?
Good morning, Dan. I'm doing very well, thanks.
So where are you calling from? The apocalypse not been too bad for you by the looks of it.
Yeah, we've still got, things are working okay in the house. I don't want to look out the window. It's a pretty bad scene out there. But yeah, we're able to keep going here. We've got a water supply and a few scraps of food around.
Excellent, excellent. Well,
yeah.
nice to see you. And I was just thinking, the first time, it's probably not 20 years, but maybe 15 years ago that we first met. And
yeah,
it was
2005.
2005, and it was the catchily titled National Industrial Symbiosis Program, which
yes.
Which when I think back, I was at WSP. You were at Scott Wilson, as it was.
Scott Wilson, as was.
And so basically, we were two big consultancies running a DEFRA-funded project. So it was like a Jets and the Sharks West Side Story moment for us. We weren't meant to be friends, but we were. But
thrown together.
It was. To be fair, it was I've only got fond memories of that project. I don't know about you, but it's kind of like there's a precursor to a circular economy and all those things. What do you remember?
Absolutely right. I just remember. I mean, we must have run hundreds of workshops for people from all kinds of different industries, pharmaceuticals, construction, water, what have you. You know, the great thing about NISP was it was all about bringing industry together to look at, your waste streams and seeing, okay, I've got this, we're throwing away this much tonnage of this sludge. Is anyone out there got any solutions for this? And, you'd find some tech company would come in and say, oh, we've managed to work out a way of getting, some of the heavy metals out of this, or, recovering some valuable stream. And it was just fantastic. You'd have, it was a bit like sort of trading almost, because you'd have these little slips. This was before everything got digitized. So this is sort of 2005 to 2009 sort of time. And, it was like trading little slips. I've got this much of this, and can you do with something with that? And it's all about making sure you got a match for resources. I must have run at least 100 of those workshops, and always great fun, always exhilarating, and always feeling afterwards that you'd made some genuine connections for people within the industry, and that, as you say, that was the germ of the circular economy idea. And so I think, now we'd probably call it something different, maybe something a bit easier to say than National Industrial Symbiosis Program. But at the time, it did the trick. And what makes it work was the team. You needed a great team of facilitators.
Absolutely, it was like getting a match. I think was
yeah.
So yeah, when you could match two different companies, two different industries, and there were some really cool case studies. So I remember, like at its purest kind of level, it was it was born out of, was it Denmark, originally?
That's right, Kalundborg. We got this huge industrial site where you got surplus hot water and carbon dioxide, and you've got all sorts of interesting things going on with fish farms and chemical companies using each other's surplus materials and resources. It's an amazing site. I think there's about 5 or 6 big industries co-located there, so it's quite unusual. You have to, you get lucky sometimes, I guess, with those big ones.
Well, yeah, that wasn't the really cool. Like, one of the famous ones was the tomato growing plant next to an energy.
Yeah, that was up in Teesside, wasn't it? I think. Yeah.
So what was that one again? Like, can you remember the details on that? It's like capturing the CO2 and using the heat.
Yeah,
to grow tomato.
That's right. It was definitely the increased levels of CO2 increased the tomato production. I remember that.
Yeah, well, look outside now, how many tomatoes there are in 2050 everywhere. But I get, and I think, like you, what was against industrial symbiosis was its brand. Unfortunately, it's just not catchy. Whereas the circular economy has managed to kind of grab that. But it's resource efficiency, circular economy, industrial symbiosis. It's all the same thing, isn't it? Sustainability. And I think when I look at your kind of backgrounds and where you've been working in sustainability for 20 years, all over the world, from pioneering things like circular economy, industrial symbiosis, but sustainable infrastructure and lots of big things. And now you're at AECOM as a director, one of probably the biggest engineering or multidisciplinary consulting firm in the world. What do you where are you kind of being drawn to at the moment? What kind of projects, and where's your time most spent in this whole sustainability area?
Well, I think I see really 3 or 4 key sort of shifts and drives. The big one at the moment, of course, notwithstanding we're all dealing with COVID-19 in our various ways. But underlying that, you still got that bigger crisis and this is why we've got this apocalyptic scene in the background on your camera there, Dan, because that's the kind of thing that can happen with horrendous extreme weather events and all the stuff that could get locked in if we end up going over 3 degrees of warming. And so the big crisis that we've got to keep in our minds is tackling climate change. And what I'm finding with the folk that we're dealing with, and as you said, AECOM's clients are major infrastructure operators and owners, city authorities, industrial manufacturers, who have facilities all around the world, big energy companies and water companies and so on. All those folk are working out how they get to net zero, and how they do that in a way that keeps their company resilient, but also allows them to adapt to changing conditions, both from the environment in terms of weather and extreme events and that kind of thing, but also some of the big trends that are coming down the line. So electrification, automation, machine learning, digitization, and switching fuel sources, going away from fossils and onto hydrogen and electric. And it's a lot of things to consider, and it's a lot of things to grapple with. So I think sometimes it's really important to just break it down and say, look, well, net zero means really we've got to do a few things. We've got to shift off fossil fuels. We've got to get our energy use down. We've got to look at new technologies to heat or power our infrastructure. And then whatever we can't do right now, we've got to offset it. And you've got to find good ways of whether it's restoring damaged peat bogs, or replanting areas that used to be forest, or protecting and enhancing existing areas. You've got to do a lot around that. And that brings you into the sort of second big shift, I think, which is, everyone's talking about there's the biodiversity crisis as well as the climate crisis. And you've got, despite years of conservation efforts, you've got species still going extinct and habitats getting eroded, and so I think certainly in the UK we've got quite a good strategic sort of policy framework coming through with a 25-year environment plan and the new environment bill when that comes through. But what our clients and what people in industry and infrastructure want to know is how can you quickly assess what's going on your estate with regards to habitats and species and biodiversity and pollination and some of the other big ecosystem services that everyone wants big landowners to be thinking about now in terms of water quality, flood regulation, air quality. So a lot of our clients are sort of looking at their estates and whether it's the land along the trackside on a railway, or whether it's the area around an electricity substation. All of these big infrastructure operators and manufacturing sites have land, and they have habitats on that. So how do you understand what's on there, see what condition it's in, see what species you've got, and then manage that so that it gets better over time. Actually, you're improving the environment. And I think this is where we'll see a lot of new technologies like use of drones for surveying, use of remote sensing to really capture things quickly, so you can ongoingly monitor and check on that over time. You're not having to send out 1,000 ecologists every few months to see what's going on. You actually need to embrace the technology and see how you can automate some of those processes to bring the costs down, but also keep stewarding the environment in a decent way so that you're actually having a good effect.
So that's the biodiversity net gain concept, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
which is, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think when I started off my career, like in the kind of environmental consulting sector, it was, I don't know, I was going to say there was a very negative view of biodiversity in many ways from developers. It was oh bugger, we found some newts on our site.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't tell the EA, or don't, whatever it might be. Oh, excuse my French brother. There's kind of like this negative attitude to it, but ultimately, like, now sustainability is bedding in. How can we have a sustainable society, a healthy society, if we don't have productive environments and a biodiverse environment? So it's kind of going back, isn't it, all the way to the kind of the roots of the issue.
It is, and I think you see that with the new sort of conceptual ways of presenting sustainability. I don't know if you remember in back in the day, you used to have those three circles, the sort of Venn diagram with environment, social, economic, and sustainability was the bit in the middle where they sort of interlocked, and you always had to talk about trade-offs and we'll get some social benefit here, but sadly the environment has taken a bit of a whack here. I think it was always the environment that got traded off, wasn't it, in the end? And I think we've sort of moved out of that mindset now, and I think if you look at the new ways of presenting sustainability, you've got a big circle with two circles within it. You've got the environment is the big one, the basis, the foundation. Decent environment's the foundation for everything: mental well-being, habitats working, ecosystems flowing, we're getting all those benefits from air quality and that kind of thing. And we've seen that with COVID. One of the silver linings, despite all the tragedy, is that we've seen air quality improve, and that means people can go out for a run and not feel ill afterwards, in big cities. So getting the environment right, and then looking at how you can build a strong society around that, and then you get the economic benefits and the jobs and the growth on top of that. So I think it's a bit more of a solid foundation through really stewarding and cherishing the environment is the way to go forward, it looks like.
I agree. That's as a company, that's kind of our mission, is to empower people with the knowledge to improve our environments. That's first and foremost where it starts, right? So, but there's a kind of few things you talked about there, and I guess I've got to ask you. There's a couple of questions. First of all, where do you think we are? Where do you think we are on that 3 degrees process? How the global warming, climate change bit, and what does it look like? Is it as tragic as we're painting it could be? But also, how do you think that COVID will impact the thinking of business around sustainability and responsibility moving forwards? Maybe those two things are linked together more than before.
I think they are. I think coming out of COVID and how we respond to climate change going forward is really they're wrapped up together now. And in many ways, COVID has shown us how vulnerable society is to big systemic changes that we weren't expecting. Although there was lots of people saying, the next big thing is going to be a pandemic, we're not very good at, as human beings, as thinking about something that might happen in 3 or 4 years and then getting ready for it. And climate change has always sort of fallen into that bracket. We might not, let's not worry about it too much. It's sort of, we won't sort of feel the effects of it until 2030, maybe even 100 years out. So let's keep doing what we're doing. But I think COVID's actually brought us that mindset that you actually need to be resilient, and you need to respond, and you need to collaborate and cooperate across governments, across industry. And so I think that's going to be a real boost. And there are a number of things we could talk about there in terms of how city transport systems are changing, so that you don't have loads of people crowding onto a tram or an underground tube, because obviously that will spread the virus more quickly. But equally, you're encouraging lots more people to go out and cycle to work, or jog to work, or use different ways of getting around. Work from home, of course, like we're doing in our blitzed out, desertified homes. So it's changing whole patterns, and I think so city authorities are starting to think, how can we encourage this? How can we change the way traffic flows and the streetscape is set up, so that actually you give space to these different modes of getting around? And I think that will have benefits going forward for air quality and for well-being within cities. And you're also seeing things around sort of people thinking around things like the trend towards densification of cities, that's probably going to take a bit of a knock. Actually, people might want to, if they're going to be working from home more, they might not want to be right in the city anymore. Maybe they only need to come into the office 1 or 2 days a week. Maybe their office isn't there anymore. Maybe the company's downsized and realized that they don't need that huge portfolio of office space, and so they've only got 2 or 3 hubs where people come in, maybe once or twice a week or once or twice a month, depending on what kind of work they're doing. Obviously, it depends on the sectors. If you're talking about restaurants and hospitality and that kind of thing, it's a different picture. But a lot of the UK's economy certainly is the knowledge economy, where you've got consultants and advisors and banking and tech and all those sorts of industries which can be done remotely. And so then you need lots of data power, don't you? You need all those fiber optic cables, you need the data centers, and some people are thinking, well, actually, maybe we need to invest more in that than in 200 new road schemes or whatever it is. So where are the priorities in the post-COVID scenario that both keep emissions down but also enable new ways of working and create the infrastructure that we're going to need going forward for a different way of working? I hate the word new normal, but for a new way of existing and functioning effectively and flourishing.
Well, that's going to be an interesting challenge for companies, their sustainability agendas, if their workforce all of a sudden isn't in that building, one building as much as it was before. So, and I saw someone post something on LinkedIn last week, which was around carbon accounting in this new world where people are more from home and it's carbon scopes, etc. My response to that was, that's easy to measure and monitor anyway. If you've got meters on things like energy, waste becomes an issue. Because at the moment, our waste is commercially paid for if you have your office, but at home it's free, isn't it? You can make as much waste as you want as long as it fits within that bin and it's collected twice a week. So is that going to spark on us being charged as consumers for things like waste earlier? And is it going to mean that employers are going to, instead of having that big office they've got to service, fund renewable energy at people's homes? Or how do you see that? Because to me, I think I'd love to do that. I'd have to spend 10 grand on WeWork, because WeWork's not going to be there anymore, unfortunately for them. But why not invest that in employees and make sure their homes are as sustainable as they can be, and help people that way? So what do you think? That crazy idea?
No, I don't think it's crazy at all. It's exactly the sort of thing we've been talking about among colleagues at work, about the way, the future of office work and how you think about those big sustainability issues around energy consumption, use of water, and of course waste generation. And there's so many things to think about there, but I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of thinking around, well, typically, let's face it, an office is a pretty well-run environment. You've got contracts set up for heating. You might be getting your energy from renewables, owing to a new energy agreement. You'll have a waste provider. You'll have really good segregated waste as well. You probably have a water meter. So everything's functioning well. The office is optimized for efficiency, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you move all that back into the home, as you say, it gets a lot trickier. Your boiler might not be as efficient as your 5-year-old office, which has probably got the latest kit in it. Here we'll be working on different systems. Everyone's cooking a lot more. So I don't know if you've noticed in your household and everything else, but of course we're not buying our food anywhere else anymore. So all of the stuff that we used to waste through every day, getting food on the run, getting drinks and stuff on the run, and that would end up in train stations or what have you. It's all coming back into the home, isn't it? So I think the local authorities will be seeing an uptick in waste that they're having to deal with, and so that places a burden on their finances presumably, and will change the dynamic in terms of things like local incinerators where their feedstock is coming from, and so lots of different things to think about there. And as you said, homes generally a bit more inefficient than an office would be in terms of not only their waste segregation, but how they power their homes up, how people are powering their homes. I mean, we've got a relatively new gas boiler, but that's not the same as having a heat pump outside and solar panels on the roof. Some people are able to go down that road and invest in that, so their home might be actually more energy efficient and using more greener fuel than the office. But I think you really touched on something there with how do you incentivize the new workforce then? You might not be subsidizing or giving a loan for a £5,000 a year rail season ticket. You might be looking at a soft loan for getting 30, 10 or 30 panels on your roof instead,
yeah.
Or investing in electric bikes so you can get to the office in a different way than you would have done before. So I think you're right. We're thinking about all those things, and we're thinking about how you can change your benefits and incentive schemes for workforce to accommodate these big shifts that are going on. It's going to be huge.
And I think the other thing interesting from my background, I've done a lot of work in early stage, like IP kind of development, commercialization of ideas. And I think this is a great challenge for the nutty professor, that we're all going to be at home more. Let's link these things together. Let's link this waste production and energy consumption at home thing. Back to the Future, how he had that device that put his banana peels in it and he put his waste in and it made the energy to power the DeLorean. Okay, maybe. But that's fanciful, clearly. But surely it's not at some other level. That this we know this material has value. We know there's ways to produce energy. If you watch many sci-fi kind of visions of the future, there's those types of digestion units that create energy for the home. We need to start thinking about that.
That's right, and they've got those on American, US Air Force ships now.
Yeah,
haven't they? That you got these really. I think it's pyrolysis, the technology that they use, where you got all the waste from the canteen from all the sailors on the ship and stuff gets heated up and generates power and electricity. And I think what I saw really interesting is if that can work for an aircraft carrier, then it could probably work for a small island in the Pacific, who don't have all the right equipment and infrastructure to have a sort of a waste management system like you would in France or the UK or something. So that requires a whole lot of investment. But if you could have a system that would work in a sort of almost like a containerized approach, then you may be able to solve some of the huge problems that you see with waste in small island states and coastal areas in Southeast Asia and the Pacific and other parts of the world where it's just difficult to get those waste management systems in place. So that's an idea there.
Absolutely. I think that's part of what I'm really hopeful of, is this, that people take more of a community, local look at sustainability. It doesn't have to be a macro solution. It's work together, look at local supply chains, support the local businesses, the local agriculture, etc. And clearly that is going to, reduce emissions as much as possible, and just have less reliance on those big mega brands on everything, which is still the way that the world works. But I guess the other, how much work do you guys do on with the kind of more traditional sectors and industries like the oil and gas? Do you do much work with those guys, and how are they looking at sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, those folks are going through a big transition at the moment, because then you'll have seen, stuff in the press from the big oil and gas companies. They're all coming to the point where they're saying, well, we're in a transition now. We're moving from oil and gas actually to power and energy companies, and if most of the clients that we talk to, that's the trajectory they see themselves on, and they're investing heavily in technologies like they're shifting their petrol station forecourts over to electric vehicle charging, and you've got some of the the fastest charging infrastructure being rolled out there, and you've got folk investing in offshore wind, and then using the energy from the offshore wind to manufacture hydrogen. So you've got clean, green hydrogen coming out there, and we're seeing that in the Netherlands and places like that. And so, I think that transition will happen quite big. And I think, often the oil and gas companies are painted as, our problem and the bugbears of the climate crisis, but actually they're probably, there's clearly some truth to that, but there's also the fact that they've got a lot of capital and they've got a lot of ability to invest, and they're very big, efficient organizations that can actually make the shift. And so I think that that's the other thing to keep in mind, that some of those organizations will actually be moving over in the next decade to to a totally different way of operating, using totally different fuel sources, and shifting their position in the market. And so I think it's almost like it's one to watch rather than one to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, one of the points I think we've done half an hour of chatting already, which is quite amazing. That's gone so quick for me. Fascinating. But yeah, part of this idea is to do this completely unique idea of letting you pick 7 songs that are really special to you, that under this end of the world scenario that we're kind of currently operating on, that you'd live with if you had to. If someone had to put a gun to your head and say, choose 7 songs, what would they be? And also then we'll look at your gadget and the box set as well. But the 7 songs, yeah, I'd say that's an eclectic mix. Going from so there's folk, there's indie, there's Afro beats, there's choral. I think you know, I'll be honest, I had to research some of these.
No, I thought you'd have some fun with those
on Spotify, but I very much enjoyed it, especially the Afro beats. So is this an indication of where you spent your kind of career?
It is. I mean, I was thinking about it and chatting it through with my wife, and I've got a 6-year-old boy as well. And you know, it sort of like, it was sort of an opportunity to sort of give a bit of a window into different stages of life, really. And you know, you've got the chieftains there, as you mentioned, the folk up at the front. I mean, when I was I learned the violin when I was a kid at school, and then sort of when I got into sort of 6th form, I started sort of moving away from classical and wanted to really get into folk. And the chieftains were one of the groups that I used to have on CD, as was then, and learned actually a lot of their songs just from hearing it on the CD, and then trying to copy it, because I didn't have the manuscripts. And yeah, that's what that one there is. The one from the Chieftains is one of those that I do enjoy, and that it was difficult to pick out one of their songs, but you know, that's a particularly poignant one. It's just brings back lots of memories of you know, playing and enjoying my violin. And
you still know how to play the violin now? Could you play?
I can still scrape something out, and actually my boy is just starting to pick up a few bits as well. But yeah, the violin is a difficult instrument to learn.
Yeah,
because you got the bowing and the fingering to do at the same time, and position and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a tricky one. But yeah, scraping out a fiddle tune is a lot of fun. So that's why I included that one. Some of the Afrobeat ones, I mean, I think we've got Awile Longomba in there. Yeah, famous Congolese artist, and that's from my time in Nigeria, when I was working on a DFID, Department for International Development contract in Calabar, down in southeast Nigeria. It was a community forestry project, and Calabar is a sleepy, beautiful little town actually on the coast, near the border with Cameroon. And a lot of the Nigerian folks there used to love the music that came over from Congo and Cameroon, and so the Congolese musicians were very popular. And while we were there, you know, if you went round to a local friend's house for a party or a barbecue or something, Awilo Longomba would always be blaring out, and people would be doing a few shimmies to it and stuff like that. So that's happy memories from time in Nigeria there.
Yeah, and then there's the Yamore Salif Keita as well.
Yeah, so Salif Keita, yeah, he's also a fantastic musician. Actually, that's from later, when sort of late 2000s. Dee Dee, my wife, and I, we were getting quite into Tai Chi, and we went on for our summer holiday. This was before kids. We would go on retreat for 10 days or so on a Tai Chi retreat, and there was our instructor used to have a beautiful country place out in Brittany, and we were just in a local town and happened to be in the world music section and picked out this album by Salif Keita, and that song Yamore was on there, and so that became the sort of soundtrack for that holiday, that Tai Chi retreat holiday, and it just brings back memories of that straight away.
And then there's something very grand, some shoots. Sorry, nearly pronounced.
Oh yes, yeah, no. So I was a choir boy when in my younger days, and do love all choral music, but particularly the sort of the Renaissance sort of Baroque transition, that sort of period around the 1600s, when you get these wonderful sounds coming out from people like Schutz and Monteverdi and Gabrielli and all these guys. There's a huge sort of shift in music going through Europe at that time. And this is actually funeral music, this one I've chosen from Schutz, but for me, it's just sublime.
Yeah.
I don't dwell on the sort of funerary aspect of it, although given the backdrop to your picture, Dan, it's probably quite appropriate and sort of mournful, mournful sound. But it's really, if you listen to that one, it's quite transcendent. You really feel you're up there with the angels.
Yeah, I did, and then I had to read about him afterwards. And he's the first German to write an opera. He brought from Italy. He brought the sound from Italy, didn't he? So
that's right. Yeah,
and he's regarded in kind of the Bach kind of level of genius.
That's right.
Yeah, fascinating. Like never listened to it before. I love listening to those kind of things when I do. When I find the chance to. I've kind of made sure the kids are classical as well from me. Yeah. I'm hopeful one of them will pick up an instrument. The best I could do is like mixing records. I'm afraid, like I'd never quite get there.
It's quite a skill. Quite a skill, no doubt.
Very well, but yeah, it's still fun. And then a couple of the other ones. So then, there's the Trio Tech and like
Trio Techie. Yeah, the Greek guys, 3 Greek lads. Playing their sort of traditional Greek instruments, but with a modern take on it.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Asura Kaima Stura. That's a memory from Lama Tree Festival. Didi and I went there a few years ago, and just had a wonderful couple of days. And they were one of the bands that we saw live there, and just loved it. Just took us back to holidays in Crete in our early days and so on, and this local bar music and things. But they're very talented musicians and really just love their sound. Very cool.
It is, isn't it? I get a bit of a read about those guys as well afterwards. It's quite you get stuck in that little Wikipedia kind of loop. I know quite a lot about them.
Yeah,
I don't pronounce the name, but and then a couple of other, so they've left the kind of the commercial ones. The Grimful Asher, like amazing records. But you pick the original, not the famous kind of Fatboy Slim remix. Yeah,
pick the original, because that was actually back in 97. I think that must have come out 97, 98. That was when I was doing my master's in forestry at the Oxford Forestry Institute, it's closed down now, but that was a wonderful year, as many people who have done a postgrad degree will say this is an intensive year, but also you make amazing friendships. And actually, I'm still having Zoom calls with those guys that I was on that course with every couple of weeks through this lockdown. So it's amazing to rekindle those. But yeah, that was the soundtrack for me and Didi when we were sort of courting during that master's year and going to clubs and stuff, and that was blaring out a lot of the time. So it became a bit of our soundtrack as we got together, actually. So that's got special memories.
That's a lovely song as well. I do prefer the quicker version, I must admit. But
yeah. No, I quite like the more groovy sort of original there.
I found a YouTube recording of them doing that live. Watched that last night. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been cool.
Yeah, that was it. It's like, wow, the 90s. When you look at the 90s on TV now, but it was like when we were young, looking at the 60s and 70s on TV, you're like, oh my god, it's so basic. And you look at the 90s, and this is exactly the same. This looks old. Oh no! When
it does look old now.
Yeah, when did that? All of a sudden, it wasn't like that. I'm sure of it. So I was watching like MC Hammer the other day. That was like,
great guy. You can't touch this.
Yeah, no way.
That's such a cool song.
It really is. We could go into 90s. We'll do like a whole feature on 90s music.
We should.
And then the last one, which is on in our house an awful lot.
Well, that's why I chose it as well, because it's George Ezra Shotgun. It's the one thing that the whole family can sing together really loudly and groove around a bit. And Hugo's only 6, but he's got the words down for that now as well. So we're really enjoying that.
No, yeah, exactly. George.
It's a good sing-along song.
He's because at first you listen to George Ezra and he's nothing like you imagine him to look the first time you look at him, right? And then he's kind of got a niche now, hasn't he?
That's right.
Family musician, basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
Him and the other guy.
Where does that huge voice come from? Yeah. You see him and he's like little spindly little guy. Where's that coming from?
That's not it can't be you. That's not
exactly.
Right.
That's what I thought too. It's really fun.
But no, it is, and he's very good at it.
He is certainly very good.
So then the other couple of things were. So I'm going to save one until the end. the really amazing one. But the survival item, you've gone for a very standard.
Well, this was, you can imagine I talked this through with my son very carefully, and we had a few options. Sun cream came up, and then after sun cream, obviously, pretty important, because if the ozone layer is probably blown again as well, so a lot of UV. A sparker, one of those metal sparkers for lighting your fire.
Yeah,
pretty useful on a desert island. Axe, fish hooks. But then we thought, well, we could probably make most of that if we had a Swiss Army knife with us. So we just went for the gadget of all gadgets, the Swiss Army knife.
They know what they're doing, didn't they, with that?
Yeah, they did know what they were doing. So it's probably going to be a popular option for your future guests. But
I think,
the Swiss Army knife.
David Newman, I'm pretty sure, chose a knife, just a knife. I think it was quite an intimidating machete, maybe, but.
Right, panga.
It's a sensible choice. I've not decided what I would choose yet, which I probably should do. And then the final thing, which is absolutely an amazing choice, the box set.
Yes. Well, of course, we've been, again, it's compulsory family viewing, and obviously it's so irritating that they didn't release it all in one go so you could binge it. But The Mandalorian has been a real joy to watch, and the child, little baby Yoda, so cute, and adorable. So we've been having a lot of fun with that, and so my box set was, we think season 2's coming out possibly in October. I understand. So it's a long wait, but I'll wait and have that posted out to me in October.
So for anyone that hasn't seen it, so Mandalorian is a specific Star Wars universe series, like completely different characters, but it's about a bounty hunter, the Mandalorian. Who, if you have seen any Star Wars, you'll know who Boba Fett is, maybe. And
Boba Fett and Jango Fett, same ilk.
Go any further, but it's so well done. If you think the Star Wars originals are a bit geeky, this is kind of like it's
more like a Western, feels like to me.
Jon Favreau, who did like Iron Man and a few other films. So it is Western, and the music's amazing. Yeah. The art, like the way they show the credits and the art.
I love the art.
All that art. But it's a great choice, and season 2 is going to be amazing. If season 1's
looking forward to it. Yeah.
So just to round us off, mate. So I'd just like to kind of ask a couple of questions, and cause what we're trying to do with Rio is help individuals and organisations be more sustainable. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do. What tips kind of would you give a business that are simple to do that help them look at sustainability and be more sustainable? What would be the thing you'd say?
Well, I think it depends on what your hotspots are. Are you a business that creates a lot of waste? Are you a business that uses a lot of energy? Are you a business that uses a lot of water? So sort of you need to do the sort of posh consultancy term for it is a materiality assessment. So you work out where are your hotspots in your use of resources, of the Earth's resources, and then the ones that are really the big ones. The ones where you're consuming a lot of energy or you're consuming a lot of water. You just got to really get a plan together for that. Get your baseline sorted out. Work out how much you're using, and then get some targets in place to get that down. And if that's energy or water or what have you, and then look at some technologies that you could bring in over time, some interventions that would offset that or look at that in a different way so that you could get that figure down. That'd be the way I'd do it. And so for energy, it's a question of getting your energy consumption down. Can we put some more insulation in, or can we put some tech on the computers so that they don't sip power overnight, and bring, gradually creep the energy bill up. There's lots of tech out there, some of it which is low cost. Lighting's obviously a key one. Heating, ventilation, systems suck a lot of energy up. So it's all about looking at where your big energy consumption is, get that baseline right, and then get some targets and gradually start bringing that down. And then start looking at whether you could get some green energy in as well. So whether you can just buy some green energy certificates, which is very easy to do now. You could switch to an green energy provider. There's plenty out there. Good. What's it called? good. I can't remember. Anyway,
yeah.
Octopus. There's others out there.
Yeah.
Good energy. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. And then there's the idea of just starting to look at, maybe you might want to offset a bit of that carbon emissions. If you can't get it down right now, so then you need to look at what sort of offsetting programs are out there that you could use. Maybe look at tree planting or energy efficiency measures as well. So there's a few things you can do there. So they're the sort of tips how I do it. It's all about, you can't manage unless you've done some measuring. So you got to get your baseline, get your footprint sorted out, and then start to manage that.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I think if you agree with this, but it's exactly the same advice to an individual, isn't it? Like if you look at
absolutely
the process, where are you in?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people are now working out their own carbon footprint, and there's loads of apps that can help you with that. And WWF have got an easy one, I think. Yeah, so you can just go on and see what your footprint's like. I mean, most of us are ticking around in an economy like the UK at sort of 10, 12 tons, whereas we need to be sort of around the sort of 2, 3. And so you can see that's a gargantuan change we've got to make in our consumption patterns.
Was the old, like, using 3 worlds of resources, aren't we, on average?
Yeah. And a flight to Australia from here would burn a good chunk of your sort of annual carbon budget. So that's when it brings home to you the fact that we're not flying at the moment, obviously, and that's a big change in people's behaviour patterns. But we need to think about, do we go back to what we were doing, or can we use this as you said it earlier in the conversation, Dan, an opportunity to go local?
Yeah.
And enjoy your local environment a bit more, probably a bit further than 5 miles, which is of course the latest guidance in Scotland.
Yeah.
Don't go further than 5 miles. But I think thinking a bit more locally is going to be a way of trying to do that, both in terms of where you get your food from, where you go for your holidays, and that kind of thing. It will bring your footprint down pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Great advice. So I think from I think our perspective, that's a great place to leave it and wrap up. So
okay.
I think thanks so much, Robert, for your time and taking us through that.
Absolute pleasure.
Absolutely fascinating. Great music choice as well. And if you want to listen to
Thank you.
Robert's playlist, they're available on Spotify and on Apple Music. So follow the links on our website, newsletter, and in Rio. And just to say thanks once again, Robert. I've been delighted, and let's do this again sometime.
Absolute pleasure to catch up with you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
All the best. See you later, mate. Bye.
Take care. Bye.